Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Talking Teeth podcast. This is episode 2, the second episode of the new podcast here on the channel. My name is Steven, and I am a first-year dental student. I'm here in a special place. This is my childhood home. This is my bedroom that I grew up in. And if you're watching on YouTube here, get a little bit of a view here. You'll notice that this was actually the location where I recorded a few videos a while back on my winter break. I came in here into this room and recorded quite a few videos. And I actually, it's funny. I thought that this was appropriate. I planned on recording this second episode of the podcast here back in Memphis at school, but it just so happened that the time lined up to where I needed to be home for spring break from school. And so I happened to be coming home, and the time just sort of lined up to go ahead and record the second episode of this podcast. And I've been super excited about it. And I was just thinking about it right before hitting record. I was like, I'm telling the story about basically my life as far as my career is concerned. And I'm telling it while sitting in my childhood bedroom, which is just a funny coincidence. It wasn't planned, but I think it's actually fitting because my room at school in Memphis, it's only been mine for a little bit, for a few months. But this room here is where I grew up. It's where, I went from a young child to a boy to a young man, and eventually went off to college and started to have plenty of other experiences and things. But this podcast episode is going to be about my path to dentistry, my journey to becoming a dental student and eventually a dentist, a practicing doctor. And this is just going to be the unabridged version, the story, start to finish, of how I chose dentistry and how I went through the entire process myself. But I wanted to quickly introduce why I'm doing this. I've given little bits and pieces of my career, little bits on the channel before. And so if you've watched all the videos, you've probably been able to piece together some things, and you've probably been able to come up with some sort of a brief synopsis of my history. But I remember what it was like to be a pre-dental student. It's stressful. It's scary. I mean, a lot of times you really just need to hear somebody tell you that it's going to be okay. And I think solidarity is really important. If you can listen to someone else's story and find yourself in their story, a lot of times that really, really helps you with your own journey. So that's what I want to do. I want to tell you my story, start to finish, and hopefully you can, like I said, find a little bit of your own experience in mine. Maybe you don't. Maybe you find nothing similar about my experience to your own. But nevertheless, this is sort of the story of my dental career and my dental journey. I was born into a family with a father as a dentist. So maybe I could have said that a little bit more eloquently, but my dad is a dentist and has been now for over 40 years. I think it's actually been 41, 42 now. So I grew up with a dad as a dentist, and it's obviously, what your parents do, especially when you're so young and little. I mean, they're your world. You don't understand anything yet, and your parents are everything. And I didn't know a whole lot about any job, truly. But I did know that my dad was a dentist. And I always say the first thing that I remember about that, and the first thing that was significant to me about my dad being a dentist, was that when I was young, when I was really little, started losing my primary teeth and started getting my permanent teeth in, my dad would pull our teeth. My brother and I have a younger brother. And he would come home with a little kit of extraction materials, a few instruments, and a little bit of topical anesthetic. And he would come home and pull our teeth. And it was like the coolest thing ever to me, because I would go to school and I would get to tell people that I lost a tooth, which is already, if you remember, the coolest thing ever when you're that age. Losing a tooth is so cool. But I got to tell people that my dad pulled it. And I don't know why. It's even saying it now, it's kind of like, it's funny, right? But like, when you're that age, those things are just so important. And so I got to say, like, my dad pulled my tooth, and it's the coolest thing ever. And he used like a real instrument, and he numbed my gums, And I don't know if anybody else found that interesting, but I certainly did. And I don't say that because I'm like, oh, it was destined to be, my life was was destiny, it was all planned. It certainly wasn't. But I did grow up with a father who was a dentist, and I grew up with a father who was building a practice and was very keen on keeping that practice in the family. He had 2 sons, and he saw that there was an opportunity for one of his sons, at least, if not both, to eventually come and work with him and eventually take over his practice. And it's like, I think if you build a business and you have children, I think that the ultimate dream as a parent is to eventually give your business to your children. I just think that's sort of, assuming it's a good business, right? And you can see your children being happy in it. So immediately you might be thinking, right, well, so your dad forced you to become a dentist. And that's what a lot of people assume that. It's absolutely not the case. I went to elementary school. There was always sort of the idea that Stephen would probably become a dentist like his dad. But there was never, from my end, there wasn't really any solid opinion on the matter. I was pretty indifferent. I was an artistic child. I wasn't super artistic. I didn't have like great artistic skills, but I did have an artistic side. But other than that, I didn't really know what I was drawn to. And I think a lot of people feel like that. I mean, it's hard to just know, like, in your life, you're going to do this. I think most people don't really figure that out until college or after college even. But I went through and it sort of was just this understanding that Stephen would probably become a dentist, right? And so even as early as middle school at my high school. So my high school was a very prestigious all boys school in Nashville. And we had 4 years, obviously, of high school and then 2 years of junior school. So it was a 6-year school. And when I went into that school in 7th grade, I was already sort of writing down that I wanted to go towards dentistry. But it wasn't really my own fully fledged and fully formed opinion. It was just sort of kind of my dad guiding me, right? But that was sort of the direction my life was going. Then in 8th grade, I found, 7th grade, but 8th grade is when I got serious. I found lacrosse. If you're from the northern portion of the United States, you're probably very familiar with lacrosse. If you're not, if you're from the South, you may have only heard of it. But I found lacrosse, and I had played hockey my entire life, so I was an athletic kid. I wasn't super, I wasn't very developmentally ahead or anything. I was actually pretty behind. It was pretty small, but I was athletic, and I found lacrosse, and it sort of became the thing that I devoted my entire life to in high school. And it's funny because I have some followers of my work, of this channel, who are in high school now, and they're already like super devoted and dedicated to becoming a dentist. And you know who you are if you're listening to this. They're already like super into it, super ready to go. And I just chuckle because like I was in high school, all I cared about was lacrosse. It was it. I had decided in 8th grade that I wanted to play college lacrosse. It was like my dream. It's what I wanted to do. And I wasn't going to stop at anything to make that dream come true. I didn't really think about my life, because a lot of people just don't. I figured I would get to it eventually. Well, nowadays we have high school students that are ready to go, right? So I think that's amazing. I will just quickly tell you a piece of advice. Enjoy yourself. Don't get too caught up in dental school yet, because there is plenty of time, and the time will come when you are to become a dental student and eventually a dentist. But you don't ever get those years of your life, those young years of your life back. You don't get them back. So enjoy them, please. And I'm not saying that because I didn't. I'm just saying that because I do have people that listen and are that age. But anyways, I was super into lacrosse. I made it my life's dream and goal. And every day after practice, I would stay. I'd be like the last one by far. I would stay after for an hour or two and just throw on the wall and do all sorts of stuff, try to get better. By my junior year, I began to be recruited by some small Division II schools, and I had a decent handful of schools. It wasn't anything, Division I. It wasn't anything crazy. Just I had some schools that were, trying to offer me a little bit of money, a little bit, tiny bit, but mostly just the opportunity to come play lacrosse. And I toured a bunch of schools, really, really small schools in sort of remote locations, and didn't really feel drawn to any of them except the University of Tampa. The University of Tampa was a beautiful school in Florida, in basically downtown Tampa, Florida, with an incredible lacrosse facility and sports athletic facility in general. And it was also the school that my grandfather went to. So you put all of that together and you add the opportunity to play Division II lacrosse, and I was hooked on that. And I have to say that this decision, even though it was really what I wanted, the decision was difficult. I remember making the decision to go there, and I walked into my dad's room after I had made that decision, and I remember just thinking, it was sort of like buyer's remorse. I was like, I don't know if I made the right decision, Dad. And he told me essentially something along the lines of, you made your decision, and it's what you've wanted. It's what you've worked hard for. If it's not right, you can decide, but right now is essentially the time to give it a shot. So fast forward, I graduated high school. High school was awesome for me. I absolutely loved it. I really fit well in my high school. A lot of people don't think fondly of their high school experiences. I loved it. But I graduated from high school and I went down to Florida to play lacrosse and to start my education. Went into college. Once again, update on the dentistry side of things. At this point, you're going to college, right? So it's like you need to figure out what you're doing with your life. Essentially, you need to figure out a direction, a general direction. Is it going to be business? Is it going to be medicine? Is it going to be something else? The arts? Look at me. I don't even know how to name other careers. I'm so disconnected from everything. But so I knew that dentistry was sort of the direction, right? Because it's just my whole life, it had been that. And I hadn't really ever had it. I was never opposed to the idea. I never was really strong about it. The only thing that I really wanted to do growing up was be an architect because I really loved drawing. But I was never really opposed to dentistry. I just hadn't given a whole lot of thought. So I go into college and I start out at the University of Tampa, and I spent an entire year playing lacrosse down there in Florida and going to school. And there were a lot of things that happened to me that year. I think I could probably talk for hours just about that 1 year, because your freshman year of college is a time that's indescribable for many reasons. It's the first time that you're away from your family fully and you're on your own. I mean, you wake up and go to bed surrounded by friends that are your age and you're living with them. I lived with with my now best friend, and it's like every day we would just hang out, watch TV, go play lacrosse, come back, study, go to the cafeteria, hang out with our friends. Like, it was just, you're just living your life the way that, pretty much entirely the way that you want to live it for the first time ever. Crazy experience. I learned so much about meeting people, about understanding different perspectives, understanding the different types of people, where they came from and how that differed from my little world that I had back home. And I went through a lot in that year. From the lacrosse perspective, I struggled a lot just because of the time commitment and the physical commitment. I have a lot of respect for student athletes after doing it because, it's a lot in high school, but college it's just a different animal. The amount of time and the amount of physical exertion that we went through every day for lacrosse, it left me pretty unable to do anything else effectively. And so, of course, as you may be thinking, school took a hit. And so I never really started out strong once I got to college academically. And I was sort of on the pre-dental track. I was taking general biology, I think, at the time, but I just was not doing well. And dental school wasn't, like a lot of students now, it's like freshman year, they're already on that track. They're already getting going. You might think back to my video that I made recently where I talked about the path to dental school. I talked about freshman year, sophomore year, all that stuff. I was not on that path. I just wasn't. I remember I came home for Christmas break and I had to tell my dad and my mom that I had basically performed horribly in school. I mean, for the standards of dental school, right? What you want when you apply to dental school, you want at least a 3.5 GPA. You just want to be doing well. You don't want any C's. You want preferably all A's. I didn't do that. I went to school and didn't get the grades that I needed. And I had to tell my parents after that first semester. And it wasn't because I was partying or I was doing anything. A lot of it was lacrosse. And then part of it was just, I was sort of lost academically. I just didn't really know. I didn't have this burning desire to do what I was doing. I didn't have that understanding of my direction. I just was sort of there, right? And so, interestingly, went back for my second semester of my freshman year and did even worse. I got C's in biology. I think I got a D in math. I mean, I'm brutal at math. Like, I'm literally terrible. I can barely do, this is ridiculous and embarrassing to admit, but I suck at doing the check. When you get a check at a restaurant, like adding up the tip, I'm garbage at math. I haven't always been bad at math, but I just have been bad at math my entire adult life. So I did terrible. And I ended up applying for the University of Tennessee at Knoxville and making the decision at the end of my freshman year to transfer home back to the state of Tennessee, back to, a place that was comfortable for me. And oh my gosh, incredibly, incredibly difficult decision to make. Scary, difficult decision. I was leaving behind a bunch of really good friends, and I was leaving behind a possible future with lacrosse, but it's like, how much of a future is it? Because it's a Division II college sport, it's a 4-year deal, but it's not going to give you a lifetime. So I made that decision, and I remember going to Tennessee and sort of starting out for my sophomore year, and it just felt right. I felt like I was in the place that I needed to be. I felt like I dressed the same as everybody. I wore my boots and jeans and my collared shirts, and I just fit in there. And it also allowed me to distance myself from this dedication that I had to lacrosse as my life's work and start to focus again on what my actual work would be, which was dentistry. Now, at this point, I still wasn't completely sold on dentistry, and I'll talk about when that happened. But I went through my sophomore year. I got better grades. I started taking, I think I retook biology. I started taking Gen Chem, did all that. And I got solid grades. Not perfect, but solid. Way better than I did my freshman year. Then we get to junior year, right? I don't know what happened. I don't know if there was a specific thing necessarily. But when my junior year, like first semester of junior year rolled around, I basically just decided that I was going to get a 4.0. Like it just was going to happen. And so and not only was that a conscious decision that I made, but also it was going to be the hardest semester that I had in college up to that point. So I went into my first semester of junior year. I ended up with a 3.96. Yes, it's still frustrating that I didn't get that last 0.04 to get me up to a 4.0, but I killed it. I did really, really well that semester. I got A's in all my science courses. I got an A- in microbiology lecture. But I remember I got an A in microbiology lab, which was considered by many to be one of the more difficult courses, one of the more difficult science courses at Tennessee. So it clicked for me. And I think it was mostly dedication. It was mostly just sitting down and understanding that, okay, I need to figure out my life here. I need to get really good grades. And at the same time, I started devoting myself to service and shadowing, which were the two things that you need in addition to your grades for dental school, right? So I started doing all of this, and that entire junior year, it just sort of started to click for me, and I started to actually act like a pre-dental student. I wasn't just acting like a college student who was sort of drifting. I was acting like a pre-dental student for the first time. And so that was junior year. The second semester, this is the event, right, that I really wanted to touch on really quickly. A little bit of water here. This was the event that was really, really formative and eye-opening and special for me. It was my junior spring, second semester, and I signed up for a RAM clinic, remote area medical, in Gray, Tennessee, way up in basically by Bristol, Tennessee. So northeast Tennessee. And it's a RAM clinic, remote area medical, dental, medical, and I believe optometry randomly. And so I drove all the way up there alone, and I went in and I was volunteering to essentially be a part of this mobile dental clinic. And after a few hours in the morning of just seating patients into their appropriate chairs based on what they were having done, I was approached by an older doctor that was sort of overseeing all of the dental students who were actually doing the dentistry. And this doctor, they were all from the University of Buffalo, way the heck up there. And they come down, and the older doctor came up to me and he said, "Have you ever shadowed before?" Not shadowed. He said, "Have you ever assisted before?" Get my words mixed up there. And I surprisingly hadn't, because even though my dad was a dentist, I hadn't really spent a whole lot of time, and I hadn't like officially assisted. So I was like, "No." And he was like, "Were you interested in trying?" I said, "Absolutely." So he set me up with a gentleman, D4, named Simon. And Simon, I went up there. I got my coat on, got my gloves on. I went up there. Of course, this is way pre-COVID, so it's weird to even think about it. But we had precautions that we took, but it wasn't anything like it is now. And I went up to Simon and I was like, "What do I do?" He's like, "This is the suction." And he said, "Follow the red." And I was like, "Okay." Whatever that means. And he was just doing extractions, right? Which can be difficult, but also can be pretty routine. And first patient, man, there came the red, of course, blood, and I followed it. And I was beside myself, enamored with what was happening in front of me, because it was the first time that I'd really, really been right there. You're focusing on a dental procedure for the first time from the perspective of the practitioner. And I was hooked. I was absolutely hooked. And together, Simon and I did about, I think, 8 or 9 extractions in a few hours. We got lunch together. I talked to him about dental school and about just his experience. And I left that RAM clinic with this burning passion and this burning excitement that I had, for the first time, understood that my future was dentistry. And I got out of there and I called my dad and I was just like, "Dad, I want to start tomorrow. I want to start practicing dentistry tomorrow." And he said, "Well, son, you've got a few more years, but if you really want to do it, it's all yours to take." So I had this new desire, and it was backing up the good grades that I'd been getting. And it was just this incredible affirmation that what I was working for was within reach. So I then took organic chemistry, got A's in that, thankfully. I liked organic. I didn't love organic, but it was actually better for me than like Gen Chem and some of the other stuff. And then the summer after my senior year rolled around. Now I'm gonna mention here that I had to do a 5th year fall because I had some credits I had to tie up because of my time at Tampa. But I got to my senior year summer and I went through the DAT experience. That was tough. That was challenging, but I was able to use DAT Bootcamp. And I was able to get through that. It was actually one of the first years that DAT Bootcamp was out. I think Ari had gotten out of dental school the year before, maybe. And he had bootcamp before he got out of dental school. But I used bootcamp in 2019. And so, yeah, I went through that, did well on the DAT, did better than I expected because my practice tests were rolling in. And I was like, "Oh, this is going to be rough." But I was very, very thankful and blessed to come out of that test with a good score that I knew would put me in a good position for school. And at that point, my GPA had brought up significantly. My Tennessee GPA was great, but my Tampa GPA was bad. And so together they made average. And that was that. I applied for dental school in the summer after my senior year. Of course, I once again had that fall coming up, that extra fall. And I was just sort of in that period of waiting, which a lot of you might be in right now, where you don't know if you're going to make it. And it's scary because everybody in your life is they're pretty much all figuring it out. They all have jobs lined up. They've got internships. They're starting to move towards their careers, right? And you're in this period of limbo. You're like, I don't know if this is going to happen for me, but I really hope it does. And so I know that feeling, and it's scary, and there's really no way to describe it other than to just go through it and to just lay in bed at night and know what it feels like. But I waited. I went through that last fall semester, completed my degree in English, which I've talked about in a video a long time ago. Got an English degree. Didn't even touch on that in this in this podcast. But finished up my degree in English, and on December 2nd, 2019, I was informed by the University of Tennessee Health Science Center, College of Dentistry in Memphis, Tennessee, that I had been accepted to become a dental student there and to finalize my career as a dentist. And yes, I cried when I got the news. I didn't cry immediately, but I remember just like sitting there for a while, and then just the emotion of all of it, like the emotion of knowing that my career was actually set and there was no more questioning, made me cry. But I was accepted and graduated from college. It was a great month, that month of December. And then I had a couple months off, thankfully. So I had essentially a gap semester where I could just focus on myself and try to improve in all of the ways that I wanted to improve before I got to dental school. And that's sort of where you guys picked me up with the channel. I mean, I started making videos again in my first semester of dental school last semester, and I've continued doing so and trying to document what I've been doing. And I have to say that dentistry so far has been difficult in many ways. I mean, dental school is extremely difficult, but also the hands-on aspect of dental school and aka dentistry in general is difficult. It's hard to do. It's challenging. It's tough. Like cutting these preps and doing these restorations. I mean, this is basic operative. This is stuff that most practicing dentists don't even really touch because it's so simple. And yet it's very difficult and challenging for me. And so the profession so far to me has already been challenging, but it's rewarding. Because for the first time in my life, I have this path, and my future is set, my career is chosen, and I'm only a few years now from actually working in the field. And so that's my path to dentistry. And I've been extremely blessed to have been on this journey because it's taught me a lot about life, and it's taught me a lot about appreciating the position that you're in. You may think this is ridiculous, but I'm going to sit here and tell you that if you're not in dental school yet, and you're in college or you're in high school and you feel like, the weight of the world is on your shoulders, I want to encourage you to enjoy every single day to the best of your ability. Because we don't get to go backwards in time. We only go forwards. And while going forwards is really exciting, staying in the moment is the thing that eventually becomes the fond past that you really enjoyed. So try to enjoy every single day. Try to remember your experiences. Take more photos, take more videos. Tell the people around you that you love and appreciate them, because they're not always going to be there, because you're going to move on and time's going to continue and you're going to find yourself in a different position. And of course, keep working hard, keep studying, and keep trying to better yourself and put yourself in that position that you want to be in. That's really it from me. That's my journey to dentistry. Of course, the rest is going to be documented on this channel. You'll get to see everything from here on out. We'll be talking on this podcast about my career and how everything's going about school. And I'm also going to get into more vlogs on the channel, as much as those may be a bit difficult to make, to try to show you what it's like to be a dental student, because that was one of my goals. So that's pretty much it for this podcast. That's it for my story. Like I said, the rest of it you'll see. In the next episode, we're going to hopefully have a special guest. If not, it'll be the episode after that. But I'm just really excited about this podcast. And the response to the first podcast the first episode, I should say, was incredible. You guys are amazing. I love each and every one of you, and I'm just excited to see where all of this goes. So hopefully you continue to support me, tell your friends about me, subscribe, like the video, of course, and I will see you next time.